Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'm just going to show some examples of composition for super macro underwater photography. We're going to talk about proximity, framing, and angle of approach. Let's check it out. With super macro, we don't have to worry about orientation, gaze, position within the frame of multiple subjects, balancing the foreground and the background, mergers of multiple subjects, amputations of various subjects. We have one subject. Sometimes we don't even have a background since our subject virtually fills the frame. But we do have three main aspects with regard to composition. One is proximity. How close are we to the subject? That determines subject size and image content. Another is angle of approach. The angle of approach obviously determines the subject orientation. And the last is framing, which will determine the subject location within the actual image or frame. So let's get started. Here's an example of a spotted cleaner shrimp taken in carousel. And I'm pretty close to it. This is a super macro shot. However, with my +10 subsea diopter and 105mm macro lens, I was able to obtain an even closer super macro shot of its eye. Different image content based on how close I am to the image. Another example of proximity. This is a macro shot taken of a conch at the Blue Heron Bridge, but with a +10 subsea diopter over a 60mm macro lens, I was able to get very close and obtain this super macro shot of the eye where it virtually fills the frame. Another example of a balloon fish taken at the Blue Heron Bridge. I was able to move above it and get very close and take this super macro shot of its cornea, lens, and iris and corneal iridescence as viewed from above. However, I was able to move in even closer, and now I'm focused right on the upper iris portion of the eye. The rest of the eye, the lens, the corneal iridescence is somewhat blurred since we have such limited depth of field with super macro underwater photography. However, not even the whole eye is in the image. I'm filling the frame with just a portion of the eye. In this case, the iris is tack sharp. Now I've moved a little bit, and now I've got a picture of a portion of the cornea of the balloon fish. Can't even get the whole eye in the image. This is all an issue with regard to proximity. Now, let's talk about angle of approach. So here is another example of a spotted cleaner shrimp taken on a coral. But I can get a different angle and get it from a completely different orientation, and now the subject and the image is completely different. Angle of approach. Another example of an angle of approach. Here's an octopus. And again, I got a +10 subsea wet diopter over a 60mm macro lens, and this octopus was very cooperative and allowed me with patience to get very close. I got a super macro shot of its beautiful eye, showing the horizontally oval pupil, iris detail, and the similar texture of the surrounding skin. Very cool shot of this eye, taken from straight on. Then I moved above, and again the octopus allowed me to approach it, and I got a very close super macro shot, now showing the cornea protruding out of the eye. You can get a different view of the horizontally oval slit-like pupil and a portion of the iris. And it's a completely different image because of the angle of approach. Again, a super macro shot of a conch eye viewed from straight on, and from a different angle of approach, the image looks completely different. So we have proximity, we have angle of approach, and the other aspect to composition in super macro is framing, which determines the subject location within the image. So here's the head of a blenny, and I kind of use the rule of thirds with the head of the blenny in the lower left 1/3 of the image. And again, the eye of an angelfish in the lower right 1/3 of the image. However, sometimes with super macro, as I said before, we are so close to the subject virtually fills the frame, and we can't really, we more or less center the image, like this eye of the angelfish and some eye ornamentation. Here is the eye of a horseshoe crab, and again, the eye is in the upper 1/3 of the image, showing that according to the rule of thirds. But if I really wanted to get a super macro shot, I moved in real tight with my +10 wet subsea diopter close-up lens, and now I'm virtually filling the entire frame with the eye, and the eye is pretty much dead center. Again, a super macro shot of the eye of a mantis shrimp. The eye itself is filling the frame, and the eye is relatively dead center. And again, I got very close to this beautiful seahorse and I showed the radial beautiful eye ornamentation and its pupil centrally with some of the iris detail. Again, the eye is dead center within the image. So with composition with super macro, it's somewhat simpler. We don't have to deal with multiple subjects and balancing the foreground and the background. We have three main things to think about: proximity, how close we are to the subject, which determines subject size and image content; angle of approach, which determines subject orientation; and framing, which determines the exact location of the subject within the image. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you found this helpful.